Next, from the City Club of Chicago, SIU President Glenn Poshard talks about the struggle to operate a state-funded university and maintain the quality of education as Illinois continues to suffer through a financial crisis. This runs about 40 minutes.
Our guest today served our state as state senator, U.S. congressman, and is currently president of the Southern Illinois University System. He is a 3-degree graduate of SIU Carbondale. Entering the university on the GI Bill, our guest today earned his bachelor's degree in secondary education, his master's degree in health education, and his PhD in higher education. In 1998, he won the Democratic nomination for governor of the state of Illinois. Our guest today graduated from Carmi Township High School in 1962 and served in the United States Army in Korea. He and his wife, Jo, let's welcome her. Jo, thank you. Like the rest of the men in the room, he clearly married up. And they are the proud parents of 2 beautiful adult children and 5 extra beautiful grandchildren. Ladies and gentlemen, Glenn Poshard. Glenn? All right, stay, have fun up there.
All right, thank you. Jay, thank you for that very kind introduction. I also want to thank the members of the City Club for this invitation to speak to you today. Knowing the esteem with which the City Club is held across our state, I deem it a great honor to address you. Since I'm surrounded here today by so many friends, and since I've spent much of my adult life in government, I'm sure you won't mind me sharing a little story with you before I begin. There were these 2 guys sitting in prison eating dinner. And one looked over at the other and said, "You know, the food was a lot better in here when you were governor." Paul Green just told me the stories. I grew up on a small family farm in southeastern Illinois. In order to provide for their 5 children during the Depression, Mom and Dad both worked in WPA for $1 an hour. My father was disabled. He and Mom both had 3rd-grade educations, but they understood one powerful thing, that in order to break the cycle of poverty, their children had to get a good education. They worked hard, saved what they could, and in my case, with the help of the GI Bill and this incredible university, SIU, they saw their son receive a college degree, the first ever in our family of 5-generation Americans. And my story is the story of hundreds of thousands of students like me who have passed through the doors of our university and earned their degree, which has been their meal ticket to enter the great middle class of America. But I have a concern from which I cannot divorce myself. And before I tell you about my alma mater, let me share with you my concern. In 2008, the Illinois Board of Higher Education, after years of research, put forth their guiding document for higher education in this state. It is called the Public Agenda, and it opens with a section called A Tale of Two States. A map entitled The Geography of Wealth in Illinois illustrates this division. One Illinois, in the green at the top of the map, is a prosperous state, well-educated, economically dynamic, with a seemingly bright future. In this Illinois, the per capita income range between $29,000 and $62,000 annually. In the other Illinois, the dark blue in the southernmost part of the state and in the inner city of Chicago. In this Illinois, prosperity is uneven and declining. Here, many Illinoisans are left behind by the education system, and the lack of educational attainment portends serious economic consequences. In this Illinois, economic health is in jeopardy. We're not keeping pace with the changing nature of the workforce. And students in this Illinois risk being priced out of post-secondary education. In the other Illinois of which I speak, the per capita income averages $10,000 to $20,000 per year. This prosperity gap between the two Illinois is wide and it's growing, and is the direct result of disparities in educational attainment by race, ethnicity, income, and region. This prosperity gap between the two Illinois equals an achievement gap that has already begun by the fourth grade. There is a 37% gap between white students and African American students in the percentage performing at basic level or above in mathematics. There's a 27% gap between white and Hispanic students. When you look at reading scores, it's almost the very same. 77% of white students perform at basic level or above in reading, a 33% gap between African American and white students. Illinois is slightly behind the nation as a whole. The achievement gap worsens by middle school. In math, the gap is 40% and 26% respectively for African American and Hispanic students. In reading, 37% and 27%. This carries on through high school. 84% of white students, 52% of African American students, and 60% of Hispanic students graduate high school. The achievement gap persists through college graduation. In a public four-year university, graduation rates reflect the disparities in educational attainment. After 6 years, 38% of African American students graduate from college, 44% of Hispanic students, compared to 64% of white students and 65% of Asian students. The private nonprofit institutions perform a little better, but not by much. This leaky student pipeline best illustrates the problems that we must overcome with respect to education in Illinois. 100 students enter the 9th grade. Of those 100, 76 graduate from high school, 42 enter college, 28 enroll in a second year of college, and 20 graduate within 6 years of program time. This is not a good record for our state. In a definitive study funded by the Bill and Melinda Gates Foundation and released in July 2013, everything that is true in the state of Illinois is also true in the entire country. We not only have educational attainment gaps in Illinois, but in nearly every state in the Union. A 2011 study organized by the Organization for Economic Cooperation and Development, called the Program for International Student Assessment, shows America's standing in percentage of students graduating from high school and college slipping badly in comparison to other member nations. The study was based on data from 470,000 15-year-old students from 65 countries. The U.S. ranked 14th in reading, 17th in science, and 25th in math. And not that many years ago, we led the world first in every one of these areas. Economists tell us that this increasing achievement gap between U.S. students and students from other countries is already creating problems in competitiveness and in long-term reduced economic growth. In particular, in Illinois, our prosperity has been in decline for a number of years, and our change in gross state product has moved us from a state well above the national average, which you see in that yellow line in the middle. You see the states above the national average, and you see where Illinois is here. Only 5 states below us now. But the study makes one thing clear. The gap is not due to spending on students. The U.S. and Luxembourg are the top 2 nations in spending per pupil. It is noteworthy that spending patterns in many of the world's successful educational systems are markedly different from those in the U.S. Those countries invest money where the challenges are greatest, rather than making the resources that are devoted to schools dependent on the wealth of the local community in which the schools are located. Can anyone actually justify the quality of a child's education depending upon the value of the property where that child is born or raised? In 1946, the father of our modern research university, Dr. Delight Morris, asked this penetrating question in his inaugural address: to what are our children born? To poverty? To poor health? To ignorance? Or to hope and promise? This question was born from his examination of the poverty and desperation of the Southern Illinois region. That other Illinois, whether it be here or in the deepest part of the state, is characterized by the lowest family income, the highest unemployment, the lowest home ownership, the lowest access to medical care, and the lowest standard of living in the state. And how do we speak to these issues of poverty, which kill the hope and the promise of a college degree for the children of the other Illinois? When President Lincoln signed the Morrill Act, which set aside land for the development of public universities, he said this. He said, "This bill represents the people's right to rise." Because he knew that educating the children of the working class would eventually create the great middle class of America. No one has ever defined public education better than Mr. Lincoln. But the question is this: does public higher education still represent the people's right to rise? A dominant position of America in the world, whether it be economically or militarily, has always meant a more prosperous future that required a college education to sustain it. But most important of all, the American public, the people, our government, have always seen higher education as the most important factor for building America's future, and they supported it until now. In a recent editorial in the Wall Street Journal, Robert Gates, the former Secretary of Defense and current Chancellor of the College of William and Mary, and David Boren, the former chair of the U.S. Senate Committee on Intelligence, and now the current president of the University of Oklahoma, made the following statement, and I quote, "State budget decisions are returning America's system of public higher education into a pre-1862 luxury available only to the well-off or those willing to assume life-changing debt. They ask, where are the visionaries of today? The U.S. needs leaders like Lincoln, who signed the Morrill Act, and Roosevelt, who signed the GI Bill. Leaders who understand that higher education is the single most important driver of prosperity at home and American influence abroad. Support is waning for higher education by the year. The vaulted place of public higher education in America is being challenged at both the state and national levels. Indebtedness, the rising cost of health care, infrastructure needs, and massive military expenditures have reduced government support for higher education to dangerous levels. 10 years ago, our university was receiving $248 million in annual appropriations from the state, and payments were on time. Today, we receive $203 million, and payments are 5 to 6 months late. And I will commend Judy Barr Topinka as comptroller for speeding those up. Thank you very much. Our cash flow is now working. A $45 million annual decline since 2002. As state and federal finances continue to decline as our primary source of revenue, causing universities to increase tuition, the door starts closing rapidly on the middle and low-income families to be able to afford a college education for their children. And the principle that President Lincoln equated to public higher education as being the people's right to rise is being undermined, and in millions of cases, made impossible to achieve. During the same period of time, we have seen a trend of more economically well-off students, mostly white, moving away from the public, more open access institutions to the more highly selective, less diverse, and more expensive public and private universities. Since 1995, 82% of new white enrollments have gone to the 468 most selective colleges, while 72% of new Hispanic enrollment and 68% of new African American enrollment have gone to the 2-year and 4-year open access schools. America, Illinois, is moving toward a bifurcated system of higher education, where public universities such as ours are given the task of closing the gap, of providing hope and opportunity to those children from not just the one Illinois, but also the other Illinois. Jefferson said, in founding the University of Virginia, that virtue and talent are sown as liberally among the poor as the rich. And at SIU, we do not run away from this responsibility. We embrace it, as do other public universities in this state. The special contribution that higher education makes to the future of America is to ensure equality of opportunity. The people cannot rise, either socially or economically, without that opportunity. That is why the first goal of the Board of Higher Education is to increase accessibility, and the second goal is to ensure affordability. And every obstacle to either of these goals must be overcome. Higher education in America exists for many reasons, but two of the most important are to give students the skills to get a job while preparing them to be citizens in a democracy. One is a private benefit to the student, the other is a public good. Employers want students who are proficient in the academics and job skills. The country needs students who are civic-minded, able to grapple with complex social and political issues. Today, with declining federal and state support, the great tradition of American higher education being affordable to all is now, in the words of Alice Chandler, the President Emeritus of the State University of New York, being transformed from a public good supported by the public purse to a private benefit financed by personal debt. A massive transfer from taxes to tuition, making it impossible for millions of middle and low-income students to attend college and get a degree. How can we build better citizens if the very institutions charged with that responsibility must now close the doors on the students who need it the most? How can we fail to admit hundreds of thousands of academically qualified students each year from middle and low-income families who simply cannot attend college because they can't afford it? In Illinois today, we spend over $25,000 a year to keep a person in prison and about $11,000 a year to educate our children. Derek Bach, the former president of Harvard University, often made the statement, if you think education is expensive, try ignorance. The Washington Institute for Higher Education Policy lists these benefits to a college degree: increased quality of civic life, increased charitable giving and community service, improved health and life expectancy, improved quality of life for offspring, better consumer decision-making, higher rates of consistency of employment, higher savings level, reduced crime rates, increased tax revenues, greater productivity, increased workforce flexibility, decreased reliance on government financial support, higher salaries and benefits, improved ability to adapt to and use technology. This is the college diploma. This is the American dream. This is middle-class America. Without this, the middle class contracts because it cannot expand. The gulf between the haves and the have-nots widens. Eventually, the social cost of not closing the gap and expanding the middle class will overwhelm the taxpayer, and societal division will become more possible every year. Well, what can we do to ensure that the great middle class of America stays intact? Let me take a few minutes, if I may, to tell you about Southern Illinois University and what we are doing. We have over 33,000 students that are located on our two main campuses in Carbondale and Edwardsville, and in our professional schools including medical, dental, law, pharmacy, engineering, and nursing. Despite the decline in funding at both the state and federal level, I'm very proud of our efforts to maintain efficiencies and lower costs, while at the same time keeping tuition rates from growing exorbitantly. Between FY06 and FY13, tuition at Illinois public universities increased by an average of 7.4% per year. At SIU Carbondale, that rate was held to 6.4%, and at SIU-E, it was 6.8%. The Princeton Review rated both SIU-C and SIU-E as two of the best public universities in the Midwest. SIU Carbondale was just ranked in the top 100 public universities in America by U.S. News and World Report, and in the same ranking, SIU Edwardsville was ranked 8th in public master's degree institutions in the Midwest, and Washington Monthly ranked SIU-E in the top 60 of 684 master's degree granting universities in the nation. SIU Carbondale is classified as a Carnegie High Research Activity University. Our medical school was recently ranked 13th out of 161 institutions nationwide in the graduate level training of primary care physicians, which is what we need the most in that other Illinois. We have clinical service centers that treat thousands of needy patients each year. We are affiliated with several large hospitals downstate. Our dental school's class of 2013 demonstrated excellent performance on the National Board dental exams, earning a 100% first-time pass rate. Our School of Nursing at SIUE is nationally recognized in training hundreds of nurses every year, one of the most needed professions in our area. We perform some of the most cutting-edge energy research in the country at our National Corn to Ethanol Research Center at SIUE and our Coal Research Center at SIU Carbondale. Our debate teams are the national champions among all universities, having won 7 national championships. And last year, one of our teams, Josh Rivera and Mike Selk, won the national championship, and our second team placed 3rd. We arguably have the best debate program in America, and we would be happy to debate that. Our basketball team, the Salukis, have been to the NCAA Sweet 16 twice in the last 10 years. Our Cougars have been ranked as high as 26th in the nation and have won 2 NCAA championships in soccer. We recently completed a $56 million renovation on the SIU Carbondale Morris Library, which is now one of the most modern university libraries in the state. We recently completed a new $70 million science building on our Edwardsville campus and a new $60 million transportation education center in Carbondale to house our #1 ranked automotive technology program and our nationally recognized aviation technology program. In the next few weeks, we'll open a new $35 million student services center also. Our campuses are 2 of the most beautiful campuses in the state, with woods and lakes prominent on both campuses. The Princeton Review's Guide to 322 Green Colleges, 2013 edition, features SIU. It recognizes both campuses for our attention to sustainability and green initiatives. We champion diversity and consider ourselves to be the most diverse university in the state. There may be other universities differ with us on that, but we strive to represent the face of Illinois. Last year, SIU Carbondale received the inaugural Higher Education and Excellence in Diversity Award from Insight into Diversity magazine. This year, our Carbondale campus's freshman class is 29% African American and 10% Hispanic. Our Edwardsville campus freshman class is 22% African American and 4% Hispanic. We are among the leaders nationally in traditionally white universities granting degrees to minorities. GI Jobs magazine continues to rank both campuses as military-friendly schools for our veterans. Our international student population hails from over 120 countries, providing a unique window on the world for our students from Illinois and neighboring states. Let me tell you about some of our students. This is why we exist. Last year, 3 Southern Illinois University Carbondale students were among 60 nationwide named to the annual USA Today All-USA College Academic Team. Lee Stewart, Dow, Illinois, population 420, a political science major, and Jessica Stout, Taylorville, population 11,000, a physiology major. Each have placed on the first team of the USA Today's All-USA College Academic Team. And Jordan Cabot from Waltonville, Illinois, population 433, A 2011 mechanical engineering graduate is on the third team. SIU was the only school in the country with 2 students on the first team. Let me tell you about Lee Stewart. For Lee, the honor is a score for his hometown of Dow. 420 people there, but he commends his university for this opportunity. Lee said, "I view this not so much as a personal achievement, but rather one for the university. I'm a small town guy. I want kids from this area to know that just because they may not have all the advantages of bigger and more affluent school districts, they can do what they want to do. And SIU Carbondale gave me the chance to prove myself." He plans to attend graduate school and to focus on a future in policy analysis. SIU's dynamic champion debate team member, Joshua Rivera, wasn't always the winner he is today. The affable first-generation college student from Chicago says he was an indifferent scholar until he got involved in debate in high school, which eventually led to recruitment by the Saluki Squad. And that changed everything. Majoring in political science, Josh has been riding a wave of success at SIU that shows no signs of abating. In the future, he sees himself living in a big city and hopefully participating in the Urban Debate League. Josh's sense of accomplishment that comes from successful research and public argumentation, finding a voice through debate, is something Josh would like to help others through his experience with the Urban Debate League. Dawn Embry is a senior speech communication major from Alton, Illinois. She's a non-traditional student with various spinal problems that often immobilize her. She's a single mother with 2 children, aged 6 and 7. She lives in our family housing village on the SIU Edwardsville campus, surrounded by an amazing group of faculty and staff who give her the support she needs to succeed. Dawn says, "I'm most proud of the fact that I'm continuing my education. A lot of people told me I couldn't and that I needed to wait until my children were older. I proved them all wrong. I have a 3.1 GPA. I'm president of the Public Relations Student Society of America here on campus, and I'm a stellar student for the College of Arts and Sciences. I blew all of those naysayers out of the water." Prisciliano Fabian grew up in Alto Pass, Illinois, a small community of about 400 people, and graduated from Cobden High School with approximately 50 students in his graduating class. He attended SIU, obtained his bachelor's degree in workforce education and development, and is currently a graduate student in higher education. It was not an easy task because he was a first-generation student whose father came to the States from Mexico as a migrant laborer. It is because of his parents that he has such a strong work ethic. At SIU, he became highly involved with student government and became student body president his junior year, as well as serving on the Illinois Board of Higher Education as the executive director of the Student Advisory Committee. He held the role of president of his fraternity, Phi Kappa Tau, and led them to completing hundreds of hours of volunteerism helping local children. His aspirations are limitless. Marco Rubio, you better hurry up if you want to be the first Hispanic president of America, because Prisciliano is on his way. These 4 students represent the thousands of students that come to our university to avail themselves of the equality of opportunity that SIU represents. Today, I have just scratched the surface on the many accomplishments of Southern Illinois University, and I do so proudly. We will continue our best efforts to close the gap to help students from both Illinois by expanding our scholarship opportunities to recruit honor students from every school district in the state, whether that district be the wealthiest or the poorest. SIU is equality of opportunity. My mission is to make sure that young people get the same opportunity that SIU offered to me. Ask any member of NASA what their job is, and they will tell you that their job is to get to the moon, to build the space station, to map the universe. Our job is to educate the next generation of American students. It's not to be a custodian or a civil servant or a professor or an administrator. It is to educate the next generation of American students, to ensure the success and not the failure of future generations.
Discovery Launch Director, Air to Ground 1.
We look forward to lighting up the night sky and rewiring ISS.
We have booster ignition and liftoff of the Space Shuttle Discovery as we continue building the International Space Station.
You can see basically the curvature of the Earth, and it makes you stop and think that we are but just a small piece of this entire universe.
If you go after your dreams and you work really hard, you can do whatever it is you want to do.
Joan Higginbotham, who grew up and attended school in Chicago, is one of our prized engineering graduates, a young African-American woman who is a former astronaut. As she was preparing to blast off for the space station, she was in conversation with another proud SIU engineering grad in mission control. And they ended their conversation with these memorable words: "Go Salukis." Thank you.
You're watching the Illinois Channel, an independent nonprofit corporation formed to provide gavel-to-gavel coverage of Illinois state government and other public affairs events taking place across Illinois.